Before we dive into today's Reddit Tales story, if you enjoy real-life drama, family betrayals, and the kind of karma that hits hard, make sure you're subscribed. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps us keep these stories coming. Now, let's get into it. My name is Carter. I'm 30 years old, and I haven't really spoken to most of my family in 5 years. Sure, there were a few ignored texts and the occasional awkward Facebook tag, but no real conversations. No visits. No birthdays. No, how are you doing? The last time I saw them in person was Thanksgiving when I was 25. We were all crammed into my parents' dining room, the same room where the family hierarchy felt permanently welded into place. My older brother Brandon, 7 years older than me, was holding court like he always did. He had that confident voice that somehow managed to sound like a lecture even when he was asking for butter. At one point, while I was rinsing plates in the kitchen, Brandon popped his head in and said, "Hey, can you hurry up and clear the dishes? The grown-ups are talking." I was 25. I had a college degree. I was holding down 2 part-time jobs while freelancing on the side. I wasn't some teenager playing video games in the basement. But in Brandon's eyes, and honestly in my parents' eyes too, I was still the kid who never lived up to his potential. I didn't argue. I didn't slam a door or start a fight. I dried my hands on a dish towel, walked out, and drove home without saying goodbye. That's how it started. Not with drama, with exhaustion. Growing up, Brandon was the golden boy. Quarterback, on a roll, got a flashy job straight out of college with a tech company in the city. He wore blazers to family dinners. He bragged about his stock portfolio before the turkey was carved. He gave unsolicited life advice while chewing loudly and swirling wine like he invented it. And then there was me, the artsy one, the dreamer, the soft kid. My dad used to joke that I'd end up painting murals on dumpsters for a living. My mom never laughed, but she didn't defend me either. That silence hit harder than any insult. To be fair, my 20s weren't smooth. I didn't get the instant success Brandon did. I tried different paths. Freelance design, app development. I even started a blog that made $0 but got a few angry comments, which somehow felt like progress. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint and walls so thin I could hear my neighbor cough in his sleep. I worked as a janitor at a co-working space during the day and taught myself coding at night. I was tired all the time. My bank account always looked like it was holding its breath. No one in my family asked if I was okay. And the one time I reached out, just once, it was for a small loan to cover emergency dental work. I was embarrassed even asking, but I was desperate. My mom didn't reply with concern. She replied with a photo of Brandon's new Audi and texted, "Maybe your brother can inspire you to get serious." That was the moment I stopped trying. I didn't do the dramatic block everyone thing. I simply faded out. I stopped reaching out, stopped showing up, stopped chasing approval I was never going to get. Instead, I focused on building my own life. Slowly, clumsily, but mine. I founded a small SaaS company out of my apartment. It was messy at first. I made dumb mistakes, hired the wrong people, wrote bad code, spent weeks debugging something that turned out to be a missing semicolon. I ate cheap frozen meals and wore the same 2 hoodies on rotation, but started to grow. 1 client became 5. 5 became 20. For 2 years, I reinvested every cent and barely left the apartment. I didn't feel rich, just focused, awake. Then one day, a bigger company reached out. They wanted to license a piece of my product. The offer was solid. I took it, and suddenly, I wasn't just surviving. I moved into a better place. Bought a car that didn't make a clicking noise every time I turned left. Hired a real team. Got an accountant. Learned how to sleep more than 4 hours a night. I didn't become a billionaire, but I became comfortable. And the best part? I did it without a single dime from my family. That felt amazing. Which brings me to last month, when my cousin Grace texted me out of nowhere. She was getting married, and she wanted me there. I stared at the message for a long time. Grace was one of the few people who never treated me like I was disposable. When family gatherings got too loud, she used to sneak me snacks while I hid in the garage to avoid Brandon's teasing. So I said yes. I told myself enough time had passed. Maybe things would be different. Maybe I could show up, smile politely, hug Grace, and leave early without anyone making it weird. I was wrong. because the second I stepped into that wedding reception, I could feel the old world waiting to swallow me again. The wedding was held at a massive estate just outside the city. Vine-covered arches, white chairs on perfectly manicured grass, a string quartet warming up under a canopy like this was a movie scene. Everyone looked expensive. I wore a simple navy suit, nothing flashy, and I brought my assistant, Leah, as my plus one. Not because I needed a date, but because Leah was calm in awkward social situations, like a human shield with good manners. The ceremony was genuinely beautiful. Grace looked radiant. Her fiancé seemed kind. I sat near the back, close enough to see her smile, far enough to blend into the background. For a moment, I thought I'd pulled it off. Then the reception started. I was walking toward the bar when I heard a voice behind me, soaked in smug nostalgia. Well, if it isn't our little Picasso. I turned slowly. Brandon. He looked mostly the same, still fit, still smug, just slightly more tired around the eyes. He held a glass of red wine, like it was a trophy, and wore a smile that was equal parts fake-friendly and dismissive. Didn't think you'd show, he said. Thought you were off at, what was it? Toilet cleaning school. I laughed, mostly by time. Something like that. Leah's eyes narrowed, but I gave her a subtle shake of the head. Not here. Not tonight. This was Grace's day. Brandon leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. So what are you doing these days, really? Still chasing that little pipe dream? Still sleeping on a futon and calling it a lifestyle? There it was. The old playbook. I felt the familiar anger rise, that tightness in the chest that used to make me defend myself like I was on trial. The part of me that wanted to list every late night, every risk, every dollar earned without help. But I didn't. I just smiled. Then I reached into my pocket and clicked the unlock button on my key fob. Across the lawn, an Aston Martin parked near the entrance gave a soft chirp and blinked its headlights twice. Brandon paused mid-smirk. He looked toward the car, then back at me like his brain was buffering. I shrugged casually. I travel a lot now. My company pays me even when I'm asleep. His face shifted, just a flicker, but it was there, surprise. Doubt. The sudden realization that the game had changed and he hadn't been keeping score. Brandon recovered quickly, though. He always did. He forced a tight smile. Nice. Then he turned and melted back into the crowd like nothing happened. But I knew Brandon. He never let embarrassment go unanswered, especially not in public. And I just embarrassed him without even raising my voice. Leah leaned in and whispered, That's your brother? Yeah. She nodded slowly, scanning his retreating back. I can see it. Smells like insecurity and overpriced cologne. I almost laughed, but my stomach stayed tense. The rest of the night turned into awkward mingling. Relatives I barely recognized shook my hand and said things like, Wow, it's been forever, or you look good. A few asked the question everyone asks when they want to measure you. So, what do you do now? I kept my answers vague. I didn't want attention. I wasn't here to flex. I just wanted to be present for Grace. Dinner finally started, and I ended up at table 7, near the bathrooms, of course. Brandon was at the center table with my parents, his wife Chelsea, and the cousins who orbited him like he had gravity. I didn't mind the distance. Leah and I made small talk with a quiet older couple and a guy named Kyle who claimed to be a consultant, which felt like a fancy way to say unemployed. Things stayed peaceful until the champagne toast began. Grace's dad went first, sweet speech, then maid of honor, then best man, Brandon. Leah tensed. Oh no, she muttered. Brandon stepped up to the microphone with that polished charisma he always used when he wanted attention. He tapped the glass, smiled, and the room quieted. For those who don't know me, he began, I'm Brandon, Grace's favorite cousin. Don't tell the others. Light laughter. And of course, he continued, the proud big brother of one Carter Sullivan, who decided to grace us with his presence after, 5 years of radio silence. This time the laughter was nervous. I felt eyes shift toward me. I gave a tight smile and stayed seated. Brandon kept going, warming up like a comedian. Growing up, Carter always had his head in the clouds. While I was applying to colleges, he was painting frogs. Or was it lizards? Definitely lizards. He chuckled, waiting for the room to follow. I didn't laugh. Neither did Leah. The older couple looked mortified. Brandon lifted his glass. Some people chase dreams, others pay bills. And hey, we need dreamers too, right? He raised his glass. To dreamers. People clapped. A few glanced at me, unsure whether to pity me or laugh. Grace looked furious, but it was her wedding. She couldn't jump into a public fight. I swallowed it. Every word. Because I promised myself Brandon wouldn't get the satisfaction of seeing me react. But that toast wasn't the worst part. Not even close. Later, after dinner, after the dance floor started filling, I stepped outside for air. The estate grounds were huge. Stone paths, lanterns, soft music hidden in speakers. I found a quiet bench near a hedge and sat down, trying to calm my breathing. Then I heard footsteps. "Didn't mean to upset you," Brandon said, appearing around the hedge like he'd been tracking me. "It was just a joke." I didn't respond. "You've gotten sensitive," he added. "You used to take my jabs better." I looked up calmly. "I'm not upset." "Good," he said, sitting beside me without asking. "Because I've been meaning to talk to you anyway." I raised an eyebrow. "About what?" He shifted into a more serious tone. "Mom and Dad are getting older. There's been some talk." "Talk," I repeated. He nodded. "About the house, the lake property, the inheritance. You know how it is." My stomach went cold. "And," Brandon smiled, that patronizing smile from childhood. "They want someone responsible handling things. Someone who understands assets." I stood up slowly. "So what? They're cutting me out?" "No one's saying that," he said quickly, standing too. "But you've been gone. Out of the loop. I've been handling taxes, insurance, repairs. I've kept things running." I turned away, disgust building in my chest. "I left because you all made it clear I wasn't welcome." Brandon lifted his hands like he was innocent. "I'm just a messenger." Then he said it, like it was a casual fact. "Let's be honest, Carter. You were never really part of the plan anyway." I stopped walking. He continued, voice almost bored. "Mom used to say you were like an extra puzzle piece that didn't fit. Not cruelly, just realistically." My hands started shaking. I didn't even turn around. I couldn't. Brandon's voice softened. "Fake sympathy. No hard feelings. It's just family stuff. You get it." Then he walked off. I stood there staring into the dark. That was the snap. Not just the insult, but the realization he meant it. That they all meant it. I'd spent 5 years telling myself their opinions didn't matter. That building my life without them was a win. But hearing extra puzzle piece out loud from my own brother lit something inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Not sadness. Not even anger. Something colder. When I went back inside, Leah looked up from the bar and immediately knew something was wrong. She didn't ask questions. She handed me water and waited. Grace ran up later, breathless. "Where have you been?" "People keep asking where the hot guy with the Aston Martin went." I forced a smile. "Just needed air." Her face softened. "Brandon." I didn't answer. She sighed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was going to do that." "It's your night," I told her. "Don't let him ruin it." She squeezed my arm. "I'm glad you came. And for what it's worth, some people notice. You're not invisible." Then she disappeared back into the crowd. Not long after, I told Leah I wanted to leave. She didn't argue. On the drive, silence filled the car until Leah finally said, "You know it's okay if you're not okay." I tightened my grip on the wheel. "I'm fine." She didn't push, but I could feel the words "extra puzzle piece" looping in my head like a broken recording. The following weeks were rough. Work should have been exciting. My company was gearing up for a major launch. We'd secured a European client, deadlines were tight, momentum was real. But I couldn't focus. I stared at code and forgot what I was fixing. I snapped at coworkers. I missed meetings. I postponed 2 investor calls. Emails piled up. Leah finally barged into my office, shut my laptop, and said, "You either deal with whatever this is, or you tell us you're taking time off. But this half-present version of you is dragging the entire team down." That hit hard because she was right. That night, I stayed late at the office, staring out at the city lights, wondering why I still cared what Brandon thought. Why a family that ignored me could still mess with my head like this. Around midnight, I started digging through old emails, early invoices, rejection messages, the first time a stranger said, "Hey, I love what you're building." That one broke through the fog. It reminded me of the old version of me, working late, eating cheap soup, learning everything from scratch, building because it mattered to me, not because I wanted anyone's approval. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. I apologized. I told them we were launching on time. We'd refine later, but we were shipping, and something shifted back into place. 3 weeks later, we launched, and it was a hit. Subscriptions jumped. A TikTok video about our product went viral. Referrals rolled in. I felt proud again. Real proud. I thought that would be the end of it. Then an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a draft of the updated family trust. Brandon was named sole executor. I wasn't mentioned at all. Not even a footnote. I folded it slowly and locked it in a drawer. Not because I was letting it go, but because I wasn't going to let them decide what came next. I didn't open that drawer for 6 weeks. Not because I forgot, because I could feel that paper in the back of my mind every single day, like a splinter lodged too deep to remove. Outwardly, life was thriving. I led meetings, traveled, expanded infrastructure, hired 2 new developers, started talks with an angel investor who'd backed actual unicorn companies. But internally, a low hum of tension stayed constant. That trust draft meant one thing. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were erasing me. I didn't want their approval. I didn't need their money. But I refused to let them delete my name like I was a typo. If they wanted to play legacy chess, fine. I'd make a move. First, I needed information. I called Adrian Grant, a corporate attorney who'd helped me during a contract dispute the year before. She was ruthless, meticulous, and discreet. I'm not suing anyone, I told her. I just need to understand what I'm looking at. I sent her a copy of the trust draft. Less than 48 hours later, she called. I'll keep it simple, she said. You're not disinherited technically. You're just not mentioned. What does that mean? I asked. It means if your parents pass without revising the document, Brandon controls everything by default. Challenging it later would be uphill unless there's fraud, coercion, or incompetence. My jaw tightened. Can you tell when it was made? 6 months ago. Notarized. 6 months ago, when I was landing my first international deal, working 14-hour days building a real company, my family was quietly writing me out like I never existed. Adrian paused. You're not crazy for being upset. It's cold, and it's calculated. After I hung up, I stared at the trust draft again and started remembering little comments from years ago. My mom joking that Brandon was the planner who kept the family on track. My dad mentioning boring estate paperwork that Brandon was helping with. They'd been building this long before I knew. And then it clicked. They didn't erase me because I failed. They erased me because I succeeded without them. Because I was proof they couldn't control or mold me anymore. So I stopped asking why and started asking what. Next, I hired a researcher, not a shady private investigator from a strip mall, a former IRS consultant turned corporate investigator. His name was Vernon, tall, soft-spoken, methodical. I'm not looking to blackmail anyone, I told him. I just want to know what Brandon's actually doing with family assets. Vernon worked quietly for 3 weeks. Then he returned with a thick stack of documents. And let's just say, Brandon wasn't the responsible family steward he pretended to be. For starters, the lake house deed had been transferred into a shell LLC registered out of state. That LLC was owned by another holding company. And yes, Brandon controlled both. On paper, it looked like estate planning. In reality, it meant the property no longer legally belonged to my parents. It belonged to him. Then there were the maintenance expenses. Thousands for dock repairs. Thousands more for landscaping. Nearly 20 grand labeled furnishing replacements. Except the receipts were vague, and Vernon traced multiple vendor payments back to businesses owned by Brandon's friends. He was funneling family money into his own ecosystem. But the most important piece came from an email attachment Vernon uncovered connected to an old domain Brandon used for business. The subject line made my stomach drop. Tax shield strategy, parental asset transfer. It wasn't just about protection. It described a plan to gradually move my parents' liquid assets into structures Brandon controlled, locking the money into entities where I'd have no access or legal standing. I stared at the email until my eyes hurt. Brandon wasn't just playing favorites. He was playing God. I met Adrian again and slid the documents across her desk. She read quietly, then said, "Legally, this gives you a foundation. Not a guaranteed win, but enough to crack the door." "What would you do?" I asked. She leaned back. "Gather leverage and wait." Wait for what? For the moment he thinks he's untouchable. So that's what I did. I didn't confront my parents. I didn't send Brandon cryptic threats. I went quiet, but I planted seeds. I asked Grace if Brandon had ever pressured her about family finances. She hesitated, then admitted he'd pushed her hard to sign something related to a shared cabin trust months before the wedding. She didn't sign, but she still had the messages. She forwarded them. I called my aunt under the excuse of checking in after her surgery. We talked like normal people for once. Then I casually asked who handled my parents' financial stuff. "Oh, Brandon has all of that locked down," she said with a note of disapproval. "I'm surprised your name isn't in the will." "It isn't," I said quietly. Silence. Then, "That's not right, Carter. I didn't need her to start a war. I just needed her to remember." Then an invitation popped up. My father's retirement party, hosted at the lake house. The same lake house Brandon had quietly moved into his own company. I RSVP'd yes, because I knew Brandon would use that night to claim the throne, and I planned to walk in with a smile. And the truth, I arrived late on purpose. The sun was dipping behind the trees, throwing long shadows across the lake as I parked down the road and walked the rest of the way, calm, measured, controlled. No flashy car. No assistant, just me in a dark blazer, a plain envelope in one hand, and a USB drive in the other. From a distance, I could already hear familiar voices, the laughter of people who once couldn't be bothered to remember my birthday. Music floated from outdoor speakers. Glasses clinked. I wasn't there for reconciliation. I was there for clarity. The backyard was dressed up like a luxury event. White tent, linen-covered tables, decorative barrels rented for ambience. My dad stood near the center wearing a golf shirt tucked too tight into khakis, smiling politely while Brandon spoke into a wireless mic like he was hosting a TED Talk. "And now," Brandon said, swirling wine, "as Dad retires, it's time to pass the torch. Not just property or responsibility, but legacy." My dad nodded proudly. Then Brandon's eyes swept the crowd and landed on me. He froze for half a second. That half second was worth everything. I stepped forward as the last polite chuckles faded. My mom's smile twitched, confused. My dad tilted his head. Grace, standing near the drink table, gave me a small, encouraging nod. I stopped a few feet from Brandon and spoke loud enough for everyone. "Before we move on," I said calmly, "I brought something to show the family. I think it's relevant to Dad's retirement and to the legacy Brandon just mentioned." Brandon's smile thinned. Now's really not the... But I had already walked to the media table where a laptop was connected to a projector for photos. I plugged in the USB. The screen flickered to life. First slide, Lake House deed transfer. A scanned document showing the property moved out of my parents' names into an LLC, with Brandon's digital signature. My dad frowned. My mom leaned forward. Next slide, vendor invoices, maintenance and repairs. A table showing tens of thousands paid to specific vendors. The approved by line included Brandon's name. Multiple vendors tied back to businesses owned by Brandon's friends. Someone murmured. My aunt gasped. Brandon stepped forward, voice suddenly too loud. "This is out of context. Those were authorized repairs. Dad asked me to manage it." Next slide. Email, tax shield strategy, parental asset transfer. I didn't speak. I let the room read. Silence stretched like a wire. Then I turned to my parents. "Did you know the lake house no longer belongs to you?" I asked my father, calm as glass. My dad blinked. "What?" "Did you know your retirement assets are being shifted into structures you don't control?" I asked. My father's mouth opened, then closed. He looked lost. My mom whispered. Brandon said it was safer. He said he was protecting it. Brandon's voice rose. "And at IS safer. This is standard financial planning. He's twisting it because he's bitter." I finally looked Brandon in the eye. And for the first time in my life, he didn't look smug. He looked nervous. "I didn't twist anything," I said. "I followed paperwork. And I'm okay not being included in the planning. I don't need the money." I turned slightly toward the family crowd. But I'm not okay with deception. I'm not okay with someone quietly writing my parents out of their own legacy while playing Family King with a glass of wine. Nobody laughed. I opened the envelope and handed my dad a packet. This is a breakdown of every transfer, every account shift, and every payment, including who benefited. My mom's hands trembled as she flipped through pages. My dad stared at the documents like they were in a foreign language. This can't be right, he whispered. Brandon scoffed. You're just bitter. You disappeared for 5 years, and now you think you can rewrite the rules because you built some app and bought a fancy car. He stepped closer, voice sharp. You think money makes you legitimate? You think you're part of this family again? I didn't move. I never stopped being part of this family, I said quietly. You just spent so long trying to make me invisible. You forgot I was still watching. Murmurs rose. Someone whispered. He put it in an LLC under his own name. Then my mother, my quiet, passive mother, stepped forward. She looked directly at Brandon. Is it true? She asked. Did you move the house into your company? Brandon hesitated. Only a second, but that second told the truth. Yes, he said, but I told you. My mom slapped him. Not violently. Not out of rage. Out of betrayal. The sound cracked through the backyard like thunder. You took advantage of us, she whispered, shaking. Of your father's trust. Of mine. Brandon's face turned red. I was trying to secure. Not for us, she snapped. Not for Carter. The crowd shifted. Even Brandon's wife looked away. His kingdom cracked in real time, and I didn't raise my voice once. I leaned slightly toward Brandon and said, low enough only he could hear, you built your empire on lies. I just showed them the blueprint. That night ended without fireworks. No police. No screaming match. Just the sound of people realizing they'd been played. And for the first time, I felt clean.